Hi there, Patreon supporters, and anybody else who managed to stumble upon this video. I promised after the first month that I would do a video demonstrating how to do the strip. This is actually the second video I've done. The one that I tried to do yesterday kind of ended up like this. You see, not very useful at all. So, I'm redoing it today. I'm going to be doing the strip for Wednesday, July 7th, Wednesday, July 6th, 2016. You kind of lose track of the days when you do a daily strip because you keep looking at the day and then saying, okay, I've got to add one, then I've got to, etc., etc. It can be difficult. Like I said, I did do a video yesterday doing a strip. Usually what I'll do in this kind of case, if I'm continuing a story along from one strip to the next, is I will... not that one. No, not that one either. I will... There we go. I will actually keep the previous day strip around so I can just drag and reuse certain pieces, but that's kind of not in the spirit of doing this video. So I'm actually going to close that, and I'm not going to cheat today. I'm going to show you how to do the strip from scratch. Or at least how I do the strip from scratch. A more talented person out there might use a different procedure. I wanted to do this strip because while some cartoonists can just point a camera at their drawing table and show you how they illustrate, I really don't have that kind of luxury, and I create the strip in, well, maybe not a unique style, but certainly a different style from what most daily cartoonists will do, so I thought it might be a little interesting for some of you out there. One interesting thing that I said yesterday, and I'll say again about myself, is I have an annoying tendency not to throw away anything once I create it. It leads to a backlog sometimes, but it also can come in handy for situations where, oh, I need such and such, and didn't I use something like that before? Oh yeah, here it is. I also, when I'm in a hurry, one of my cheats is I do have what I call the prefab section, where I can just drag certain situations that I use over and over. Like, for example, if I'm using a Beethoven strip, I've got one there, and then I just add backgrounds, add text. I've got one here for Fumetto dell'arte. Oh yeah, since it's dragging a little, I might as well tell you. For those who are wondering, the program that I use is Corel Photo Impact 13, and as you can see by the copyright date, it's a little old. I use it because Photo Impact is the only program I found out there that actually, instead of specifically working in layers, you work in objects. And that's what fuels the entire strip, is objects. I can take one of these pieces from my library and just drag it, and I'm not dragging an entire layer, I'm actually taking a tiny little piece like that, then I add another piece like that, add some text like that, and there we go. I don't have to do an entire full-size layer. I can drag and drop pieces where I want. I can add them. I can manipulate just them like that. That's what endeared me to Photo Impact to begin with. And until there's a program out there that actually uses pieces the way I want to use them, I'm kind of stuck with this 8-year dead program. But I love it. It's got a few quirks that I have to work around, but I don't really mind because it is so convenient. Now, what I'll usually do to start a strip is I'll go to what I call the frames library. As you can see here, along the right-hand side of your screen, I've got a number of different pieces that I can use for whether I'm doing a daily strip, like right there. That's your standard daily, or if I'm doing a single panel, I've got one there like that, or you saw I used the Sunday page, full screen one. I've also got standard Sunday page, I've got a 9-grid Sunday page, I've got 5-panel daily strip. This is also where I keep the copyright date for certain panels where I don't have the copyright worked in like I do in the daily strip. Alright, let's start with the characters. I've been using Victoria, what I call the Veiled Victoria look this week, so I'm going to continue with that. This is actually the first look that Victoria had in the strip. If you go back to the very first strip from February 8th, 2006, this is the exact piece of clip art that I used for Victoria. I actually re-downloaded and rescaled it since then. And I did purchase this piece of clip art. I go out of my way to only use images that I legally can use. I purchase my fonts, I purchase my clip art, or I use public domain images or stuff that's specifically marked for reuse with modification. So, just for those of you who are wondering. So that's the look that I'm going to be going with. This is the usual Victoria look. Just have to slightly scale her down for the size she normally appears in the strip. That's her normal size right there. But that's not what I'm using this week. So I also, as I said, over time, I don't tend to throw out pieces if I use them. I did the googly eye, the shock, angry, yelling. Here's one I haven't used for a while, the sideways. I usually use that with an email strip, but I haven't done email strips in years. The Warrior Victoria, everyone's favorite, with Patton's helmet. And some looks that I used once, like this one, I used in a strip mocking Charlie Sheen, and never really had a need to reuse it, but it's there if I feel like it. I've also got the Crimean War Flying Ace there. That's a favorite with Peanuts fans. So like I said, I do tend to oh, look, there she is, a Snooki. I forgot I had that one. Okay. And I hope I always forget that I have that one. Here we go. I have versions of this one modified, so she is, in this case, shocked and yelling. I want her angry and yelling, and I should have just angry face. I don't see that here. I don't have an angry of that pose where she's just angry and not yelling. So here you go. You get to watch me create a new piece. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to create a new Victoria pose object, which I'm surprised I didn't have, because like I said, I tend to keep everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the standard googly-eyed version of this piece right there, and I'm going to add eyebrows to it. So let me just zoom in on this pose there. And okay, I want a little bit of a soft edge, but not quite as much as over here. I think that was a little too soft, but not quite in the mood to redo that yet. And then, let's see, 14, yeah, looks about right. A little cocked eyebrow there. Try a little straighter. I think the cocked eyebrow effect. So right there. Yeah, actually, let me try that a little thinner. Yeah, I can be picky. It can make the strip longer from time to time, but here we go. And there we go. I think that looks good enough. And like I said, I try not to waste anything, so I'm going to save this one to the library in case I need it again. One of these days I'm going to sort this library too. So you've got all the Warrior Victoria in one place, for example. Alright, I'm using a background today because I ended yesterday with a background. If you look at the early strips, I did use backgrounds fairly frequently, but then I stopped for the longest time because back then it was a real pain to do. Now let me show you. I've got an image here that I got from Google Images, marked as reusable. So let me just drop that in place there. And I'm going to erase the portion that's overhanging there. It's a little too tiny cut. I'm going to duplicate this for each of the panels. And get across here. The program usually isn't this slow. It's slow because I'm recording. And let me pull the frame all the way to the front. Just get these guys out of the way for right now. Get her over here and her over here. As I was saying, one reason I stopped using backgrounds for the longest time is that what I used for the speech bubbles for the longest time were these outlines that came with Photo Impact. You can see this is my most common one that I ended up using. A number of others. But the problem with them is that they were outlines, as it says there, so, yeah. So what I needed to do when I wanted to have a background in the strip is I had to write out I'm not the world's greatest typist. I had to create the dialogue and then resize the balloon to fit it. Like right. Sometimes it's also a little awkward working with a background when you accidentally click on the background when you're trying to work with a different object, as you can see. Then what I would need to do is I'd need to go into the background object for each panel, for each speech bubble, once I had it exactly positioned the way I wanted it. Go in and painstakingly erase the background to fit the speech bubble. Like that. When you get down here to the corner, it can be a little tricky. You don't want to go over. Just like that. See, all of that I just lost right there. It took me about a year to figure out a solution to that. And it involves what I have over here called the solid speech bubbles. In these cases, I actually took the original outline, laid it over a graphic, and erased around it, so I actually have a white background that goes over everything else. And then I can just tuck that balloon behind. Right there, then boom. And there we are. Obviously a lot simpler. It made things a lot faster doing the strip, and I felt a little more free to use backgrounds again. However, I still only really use backgrounds when I think it adds to the story. Which for comic effect, the 1,776 pizzas that we're talking about right here, prank called in by George Washington. If you haven't read this week's story yet, go. It's amusing, at least to me, for the time being. All right, let me add. You go bye-bye. Don't need you anymore. Let me add some of the characters that are in today's strip. Liz is in today's strip. You can see I have folders for a couple of the most often used characters. They have their own little folder. Pretty much everybody else is in the big cast folder or the supporting cast folder. The only difference there is the actual scale. I started doing the strip back in 2006 at what was then the standard size for Comic Sherpa, where it really first got its big launch of 600 pixels across, and for a daily strip that meant 204 down. But as you can see up here right now, I'm actually doing the strip at 1800 by 612. I started doing that back in late 2008 with the books in mind, when I was still publishing annual collections of the strip, back when enough people were buying the strip or buying the books to make it worthwhile. So some of these are small, like there. I would have to resize him, but it can be handy to have the small ones around sometimes too. So now that I have Liz here in the strip, let me actually scale her properly. The Veiled Victoria is not quite standard size, so I have to, when I use other characters with her like I'm doing today, I have to resize them. This is also why, if I'm continuing a story from one strip to the next, I'll keep the original around. So we'll have her right here. Liz right there. And if you notice this flat side here, most of the character poses have a flat edge either there or they'll have a notch somewhere. I use that to position them against the edges of frames here or the edges of the next frame if there's a little bit of overlap. So it's easier when I duplicate them, and I'll show you in a second about that. Now, over here, the pizza delivery girl in this strip, I'm using my friend Kim right there. You may have noticed over the years some characters that I reuse. Kim is one of them. Kim's actually an old friend of mine. I've known her for going on 20 years now. She is the sister of Dawn, who, yeah, you see her a lot. There's no historical significance to either of these two characters. It's just, I took the photos years ago, I have them, they're handy, and it's a nice little wink to some friends. All right, now let me duplicate the characters here, drag them over for the second panel. And then you can see I'm using that little flat edge to help position so the panels are as close to uniform as possible. And then, now we're going to need a little more room here. It looks a little cramped, so let me okay, good. And the way it ended up, Liz is tucked behind Kim's hair there, so I don't have to readjust and bring anyone to the front or shove anyone to the back. Okay. I'm going to take my yelling Victoria here. I'm going to have her yelling in panel 2. I'm just planning out the dialogue as I go along here. And now let's see where this one is positioned. 633 and 385. Oops. Like I said, not the greatest typist in the world. So we'll just tuck her behind Liz and in front of Kim like the others. And I actually think I'm going to have her calm in the last panel again. How wide is this one? This one's 212 or 192, so looks about the right scale. This one's actually a little larger, so I have to go by my sight. And I think I'm going to have her leaning down a little and have Kim. It's an interesting looking pose. Like I said, I have pieces here that I reuse over and over, or never used after the first time, but you never know when you're going to want. Oh, that should actually be up in Victoria Pose Objects. I think I have the standard notepad. I'll reuse the little piece of parchment here. Horizontally. Okay. So I've got the graphics how I want them. Now I just have to add my dialogue. Like I said, the magic of the solid speech bubbles here. For those of you who are curious about the font that I use Digital Strip. Fell in love with it 10 years ago. Bought the rights to use it. I think it's the cleanest, most readable, and yet not goofy of the so-called cartoonish fonts out there. It looks like lettering done for a regular comic strip, so that's why I stick with it. So let me... Yeah, one of the running gags for those who are relatively new to the strip is that every July 4th, George Washington prank calls Victoria to rub in the fact that he won the Revolution. And I'm just expanding it to other pranks this year. Victoria retorting. I've gotten pretty good at the years of trying to guess how much space I need for text, but I usually will end up underestimating. And I'll almost always have to rescale and resize the speech bubble. You know, how about I have Liz deliver the next line, so we'll have Victoria turn to face Liz. Yeah, one thing I'm sure drives certain people nuts. The way I positioned the copyright notice here, you can see that I've got it down at the bottom. That's because the portion that has to appear pretty much every strip is almost always going to be at head level, and the speech bubbles, if they overlap, are going to just wipe out mention of universal U-click, which something tells me some days John Glenn is actually happy to not have to explain to people. As you saw, I dragged the balloon and the text over together as sort of a cheat, you could say. Sometimes I'll do that because there is a bug in this version of Photo Impact where if you're working in black and white like I do, it has a tendency to not recognize using anti-alias. So now we're all set to add the dialogue to the final panel. Yeah, I know I'm an American, and the strip is mainly read by Americans, but I'm also an Anglophile, and I find the need sometimes, especially since this is Victoria we're talking about, to comment on British things. So thus, today's punchline. Position that. Something else you may have noticed. Most of the text in the strip I do at 26 points. If I have a secondary punchline, or I need to spread a punchline to a second balloon, I'll shrink it down slightly to 22. That's a trick I picked up from Walt Kelly, who was notorious for having second punchlines in Pogo, and they almost always were, ignore my husband's text. And they almost always were a slightly smaller text. So there we go. You can see that I just had to turn auto aliasing on and then off, or off and on again, to make sure that it takes. Last little bits of bookkeeping. Even though it really isn't needed anymore in this digital age, I do still like to date each strip, just in case I come across it somewhere else to remind me of when it actually ran. It used to be really important to have the date visible on each strip back in the days of actually cutting master sheets of strips and pasting them onto the laid out comics page before everything went visible. Oh, and I accidentally changed the color of that text when I went to add the date. So let me fix that. There we go. But I'm a traditionalist, so I still make sure I date just about every strip. And I don't always sign every strip anymore. No particular reason, just sometimes I'm in a hurry. But I do have these pieces with signatures if I feel like putting my name on something, which I'll do today because I'm demonstrating, so I'll just hit there, and yeah, I think I'll have that in the upper right instead of overlapping there. So now let me just save it. New Adventures of Queen Victoria, 2016, July 6th. And I actually have a system event on my machine that every hour will go through my finished strip directory, and if there's anything new there, it will upload it. But when I'm in a hurry, up against deadline, or want to make sure that it gets done, or demonstrating in this case, I'll just run the macro that will resize everything to the sizes it needs to be, and then we'll upload them to uClick. And there we go. And you've just watched me do the New Adventures of Queen Victoria for July 6th, 2016. And thank you very much for watching.